Alright, we're looking at Act 5, the final act of Macbeth. And due to the number of scenes in the act as well as the depth that it goes into, I've decided that it would be better to just split up the act into two parts. So this is the first part, which will be covering scenes 1 to 4. And I've again used screenshots from the Polanski film because it just follows on nicely from the previous video of Act 4, and it also allows you to see where we are as we move through the play. I've also attached some quotations on some of the slides just for you to read as we go along, and there's a couple that I really want to bring to your attention, and I think that they need to stand out as well. So the first scene of the act starts off at a room in the castle at Dunsinane, so that's Macbeth's castle. Nice little establishing shot there so we know where it's taking place. And the two characters that we first introduced to are a doctor and a gentlewoman. Now, a gentlewoman is a servant to Lady Macbeth. She's basically responsible for looking after Lady Macbeth and doing what Lady Macbeth asks. And she has witnessed recently Lady Macbeth sleepwalking. She's a little bit disturbed by it, and she's asked a doctor to come and examine her or look upon her and see when she does the sleepwalking and examine her from there. And the doctor says, well, I've actually been here for 2 nights now, and I have yet to see anything that you told me. Now, luckily for both of them, Lady Macbeth does arrive sleepwalking, so the gentlewoman isn't going insane. But the gentlewoman says that I have seen her rise from her bed, throw her nightgown upon her, unlock her closet, take out this piece of paper, fold it, write upon it, read what she's written, seal it again, and then go back to bed. And she does all of this while sleepwalking. You can see her eyes are open, but they're not actually seeing anything. And the doctor says, well, what have you heard her say? You know, does she speak? What does she say? And the gentlewoman says, well, I have heard her speak, but I'd rather not say. So, in other words, the gentlewoman is aware of what Lady Macbeth is probably referring to in her words and what she's responsible for, but you know, who's she going to tell? She can't go and tell Macbeth now, because, I mean, Macbeth will probably have her killed within an hour. And everybody's kind of living in fear at this point, so she doesn't really want to tell anybody. She also says that there were no witnesses to confirm her speech, so it's only her that's heard this. And she doesn't want to tell the doctor either, even though the doctor says, listen, you know, you can tell me. And Lady Macbeth eventually enters with a candle, and the gentlewoman says, listen, she does this thing where she looks like she's washing her hands for up to 15 minutes. Now, that's quite a long time. And the doctor says, well, where does she get this light from? She's got a candle with her. And the gentlewoman says, well, she has light by her continually as to her command. So Lady Macbeth has asked this gentlewoman, please make sure that I have a light near me all the time. It's as if Lady Macbeth is afraid of the dark. And I think that's a reference to the fact that they killed Duncan at night time. And she's terrified of the night. Her subconscious really is taking over here. She's so riddled with guilt that she actually cannot hide what she's doing or what she's saying anymore. And this is evident in a very well-known passage from the play, possibly the most well-known piece of text that Lady Macbeth actually ever says. And she says, out, damned spot, out, I say. Now, she can imagine on her hands blood. There isn't actually blood, obviously, on there. But she's trying to wipe the blood off because she's so swamped by this guilt. And then she says, hell is murky. Now, her reference to hell is quite significant in that it's almost like Macbeth and her have created their own hell. You know, the lives that they're living is what they've done. You know, they've created that. It's almost as if she knows exactly what hell is already. And the whole sleepwalking situation is kind of foreshadowed earlier on in the play when Macbeth was about to kill Duncan, and it goes on and says, Macbeth doth murder sleep. He's murdered sleep, can't sleep anymore. So, you know, there's possibly Lady Macbeth being the fruit of that, in that she can't get any peace anymore and she's doing all the sleepwalking. And Lady Macbeth continues to say, what need we fear who knows it, when none can call our power to account? So she's referring to all the deeds that they've done wrong, particularly killing King Duncan with in terms of what she's been involved with. And she's saying, it's like as if she's speaking to Macbeth. She's saying, who can out us? Who's going to say that we're guilty? Yet who would have thought the old man to have had so much blood in him? Again, referring to King Duncan. And now the doctor and the gentlewoman are saying, are you hearing this? They agree that she has spoke what she should not. In other words, they know that if she was awake, she certainly wouldn't have said that. Heaven knows what she has known, says the gentlewoman. In other words, only heaven knows the secrets that she has. The doctor says, you have known what you should not. In other words, you've heard something that you shouldn't have heard. Lady Macbeth then says, the Thane of Fife had a wife, where is she now? And we know the Thane of Fife, which is Macduff, her wife, where is she now? She's dead, because Macbeth ordered her and her children to be killed. So that's again another kind of subconscious speaking out there, spilling the beans, as it were. And then she says, no more of that, my lord, no more of that, you'll mar with this starting. That's a reference to when Macbeth saw Banquo's ghost at the banquet, and he was acting all strange. And Lady Macbeth went to him and said, are you not a man, and all that, no more of that, stop this. You mar all this, you ruin everything with what you're doing. So we've had definite reference to King Duncan, we've had definite reference to Lady Macduff, and we've had reference to Banquo. Then then Lady Macbeth continues. She says, here's the smell of the blood still. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. So she's using this analogy of all the fancy perfumes. I can smell this blood on my hands. Those perfumes would not get rid of that smell. Now there's obviously a lot of significance to this, because she was the one who told Macbeth after he killed Duncan that a little water clears us of this deed. Just wash your hands and the blood will be gone. But now she's the one who can't get the blood off her hands. Macbeth, on the other hand, is out there very confident, relying purely on the witch's prophecies or apparitions, and almost feeling invincible. So the roles really have kind of reversed at this point. Lady Macbeth is also the one who threatens Macbeth, are you not a man? And she's the one who kind of bosses him around in terms of King Duncan. She's the one who wants him dead, not Macbeth really, and she convinces him to do it. Now she's the one who's not confident. She's the one who's suffering. I'll also say that if you noticed her speech at the start of the play, particularly when she's speaking to Duncan, it's very eloquent. She uses a lot of figures of speech, hyperbole, etc. And she's actually speaking in iambic pentameter, which is very impressive from Shakespeare, I must just say. But now this out damn spot kind of this whole scene really is prose, which means just normal conversation. It's not written in any form of meter. And not only that, but she's kind of talking, she's like mumbling. She's not really making any sense. She's going from this to that to this to that. So you can see her character has been completely and utterly degraded from somebody who was very much seemingly in control, calling the shots, to somebody now who has succumbed to little more than someone sleepwalking, babbling out a couple of nonsense. So her status, her whole being is just crumbled. Now, spoiler alert, Lady Macbeth dies, presumably from suicide, because she can't handle herself anymore. But her death is so insignificant, it's not even shown. There's no details of it. Her body is just found. So it's not a gracious death. It's not even given the time of day to be written in the play as such. So it's like very insignificant. And she's a main character. That's important to note. Let's take Lady Macduff on the other hand. Lady Macduff, who we only just meet, dies shortly afterwards. Her whole death and how she dies and everything like that is very tragic. Because she's obviously a decent person. And we spoke about in the quiz what a foil is as well, a character that is in opposite to another. And I think that is definitely significant to note. Also, Macduff is completely heartbroken when he hears of his wife and his children's death, whereas Macbeth, and I'm jumping the gun a little bit, couldn't really care that his wife died. He says, well, it was bound to happen anyway at some point, which is very cold. It just goes to show how almost evil he is. But moving on, eventually the doctor says, you know what, this disease is actually beyond my practice. Yet I have known those which have walked in their sleep who have died holily in their beds. In other words, I'm completely just mind-boggled by what I've witnessed. I can't help her. But I have known people who did sleepwalk, and they died, and they hadn't committed any crimes. They were innocent. So she's not sleepwalking because she's guilty. She's sleepwalking, and she is guilty as well. But then he goes on to say, more needs she the divine than the physician. In other words, she doesn't need a doctor, she needs a priest to help her. He's obviously implying that she needs to absolve her sins and ask for forgiveness and repent and things like that. But he's saying, listen, I know what I've heard. My mind she has mated and amazed my sight. I think, but dare not speak. So he's like, I think. Like, in other words, I've put two and two together, and I'm pretty damn sure I know what she's talking about. But I dare not speak. But I'm not going to say anything, because obviously it's going to probably end badly for him. And the gentlewoman's not going to say anything either. And that scene ends like that, with Lady Macbeth back in bed. Then we go to scene 2, and it's just like out in the countryside near Macbeth's castle, and we have these thanes there, Menteith and Angus and Lennox and Caithness, etc. And Menteith says to us, the English power is near, led on by Malcolm, his uncle Seward, and the good Macduff. Revenge burns in them. Okay, so the English forces are almost here, and they're being led by Malcolm and Macduff, and also Malcolm's uncle, namely Seward. Seward also has a son called young Seward, who would have guessed. That's kind of significant a little bit later on as well. But you can see that all these Scottish nobles, I mean these are Scottish thanes, have turned against Macbeth. People are leaving Scotland, and they are running away because they don't like Macbeth. They know he's a tyrant. They treat everybody. He treats everybody badly. The country itself is just crumbling. It's infected, and that word infected is significant, because you'll see that Caithness refers a little later on in the scene to Malcolm as a doctor who he hopes will cure Scotland of the disease that is Macbeth. So it's like Scotland is so corrupted and ill with Macbeth at the helm. Menteith also refers to Macbeth in the scene as a tyrant, where he says, what does the tyrant? In other words, what is Macbeth doing? And Caithness says, well, he's trying to get his castle fortified with the people that he has left. Unfortunately, some people have run away. Well, most of them have run away, actually. He cannot buckle his distempered cause within the belt of rule. In other words, one thing is for certain, though, he's deranged, he's mad. It's almost like he's completely out of control. Angus says, well, those he commands move only in command, nothing in love. In other words, those that follow his orders are doing so in fear, not because of loyalty or will or love of their country. Then Caithness says, well, let's march on. Let's continue and give our loyalty to someone who actually deserves it. And there he's referring to Malcolm and Macduff. So they, Scottish thanes as well, have now joined the English forces to go and fight Macbeth. And off they go to go and meet the forces, who are almost there. Then scene 3, we're in a room in the castle at Dunsinane, so in Macbeth's castle. And Macbeth says to the servant there, bring me no more reports, let them fly all. In other words, I don't want to hear about any more of this many English forces or anything like that. Let them fly. Don't tell me that all my thanes are leaving. I don't care. Let them leave. Till Birnam would remove to Dunsinane, I cannot taint with fear. I will not be afraid until Birnam would march to Dunsinane. So he's really holding on to the apparitions of the witches. He trusts the witches wholeheartedly. He never thinks for a second that there's any form of equivocation there, or that they're trying to tell him half-truths or trick him. He's completely and utterly trusting of the witches. Then fly, false thanes, and mingle with the English epicures. Go and join the elegant English, for all I care. This poor servant, he says, why do you look so frightened? He calls him a cream-faced loon. In other words, why is your face so white? Of course, the servant his face is so white because he's seen a sight that makes him terrified. And he wants to tell Macbeth, listen, he tries to anyway, there is 10,000, Macbeth says, what, geese? He says, no. And the fact that Macbeth refers to geese, he knows that he's not going to be talking about geese, but it's just like the arrogance and the overconfidence in that, well, I can't be touched, so I don't care what news you've got for me. But anyway, the servant's trying to tell him, listen, there's 10,000 soldiers on their way here. Obviously 10,000 is just a guess, but that's a pretty good estimate. And then Macbeth calls him a coward and says, get out of my face, and off he goes. Now, there's a conversation that I just want to have quickly about a character which is spelt differently in different versions of the play. It's either Seaton or Satan. Now, some people say it is Seaton, and it's just a name, and there's no significance in that. I kind of err on the side that it is, in fact, Satan. And the reason why I say that, and there's much debate about this, but the reason why I say that is, I highly doubt that Shakespeare is going to create a character that sounds like Satan, possibly, just by coincidence. And this character is in fact the one who tells Macbeth that your wife is dead, number one. And number two, Macbeth has to call him 3 times before he responds. Now, the number 3 is kind of a mystical number, in that if you think about the 3 blind mice, the 3 little pigs, a genie grants you 3 wishes, 3 witches. 3 is a special number, and no one can really tell us why, but it's said that the devil works in 3s. Now, this is a play as well. It's not meant to be read, it's meant to be watched. So if you're sitting in the audience and you see Macbeth calling Satan, it's kind of like, wow, is he really actually calling upon the devil? And you're thinking to yourself, am I going to see the devil? And then when this servant arrives, it's kind of like a little bit of comic relief in, oh, it's just a servant. So let me refer to him as Satan from now on. He's just a servant, and you can decide for yourself whether you think it's Seaton or Satan. Anyway, Satan arrives, and he says the rumors are in fact true, that there are 10,000 around people coming, English forces. And Macbeth says, well, I'll fight till from my bones my flesh be hacked. Give me my armor. Now, Satan again says, does not need it yet. You don't need your armor. If it is in fact cleverly done by Shakespeare, it's almost as if Satan, as in the devil, is trying to trick Macbeth and saying, nah, you don't need your armor, it's fine, knowing that he's going to die. So we can debate that as well. But there's also a sense of, is Macbeth doubting here? Why does he want his armor? Even after Satan says, no, you don't need your armor yet, he says, no, I'll put it on. So there's a bit of a question about whether he's truthfully trusting everything that the witches have said or not. But anyway, the doctor's there, and Macbeth says, how does your patient, doctor? And he knows that the doctor's gone to see his wife. And the doctor says, well, she's not really sick, but she's troubled with visions that are preventing her from sleeping. And that's all he's going to say about that. And Macbeth says, well, cure her of that. And he's doing this while Satan over here is trying to put his armor on. He hasn't got it on yet. And Macbeth says, canst thou not minister to a mind diseased? Can't you give a drug to a mind that is diseased, in other words, unsettled, and make her feel better, From the memory a rooted sorrow raise out the written troubles of the brain, get rid of the thoughts, and with some sweet oblivious antidote, with some drug, cleanse the stuffed bosom of the perilous stuff which weighs upon the heart, get rid of those terrible thoughts that are weighing upon your heart and making you not at ease. Now, you'll know that, well, You can't do that. You know, if you are guilty and you are riddled, swamped with all this guilt, and you can't just stop that. Sure, you can kind of mask it a little bit for a little while by having drugs and alcohol and things like that, opium and whatever, but well, that's not going to really work, and we're not really talking about that at this stage. So no, the doctor says, well, the doctor knows, no, I can't help her, but he says, therein the patient must minister to himself. In other words, what he's saying, for that cure, the patient needs to heal himself, or in this case, herself. So he's not revealing what he knows, but he's saying, unfortunately, I can't do anything for her. Then Macbeth says, throw physics to the dog. I'll none of it. Come, put on my armor. So he's still saying he wants his armor. And he's also saying, well, medicine is for the dogs, I'll have nothing to do with it. And then he completely changes the topic from the fact that the doctor has just told you that your wife is not right in the head, and he completely changes his topic to saying, well, put on my armor, give me my stars, blah, 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 whatever. So he just pushes it aside. A real lack of concern for his wife's well-being. Then he says, if thou couldst, doctor, cast the water of my land, in other words, can't you take the urine, the water of my land, of Scotland, like a urine test, find her disease and purge it to a sound and pristine health? Can't you just fix her with some form of cure? Can't you take a urine test or whatever off? Then, can't you just take a urine test or whatever to try and help her? And then he changes the topic again and he says to Satan, pull it off, I say. Take my armor off. What rhubarb or what purgative drug would scour these English hence? Hearest thou of them? So he's saying, well, basically, I don't actually need my arm anymore. So now he really feels invincible. And the doctor is kind of tongue-in-cheek, tries to humor him in saying, look, if you're making preparations for a war, that's a good start, Yeah, get some soldiers together, brace yourself, prepare to fight or whatever. And then the doctor goes on to say, yes, I really wish I wasn't here. Of course, rightfully so. And Macbeth says, well, I will not be afraid of death and bane till Birnam forest come to Dunsinane. So he's really clinging on to that third apparition. Then scene 4. Oh, and this picture over here is just showing how everybody is just leaving, alright? They also pretty much know that Macbeth is screwed. Well, they think so anyway. And then scene 4 is just near the castle, but we're at Birnam Wood now. We're in the countryside, and we have these thanes, Lennox and Caithness and Menteith and that. And Malcolm says, cousins, I hope the days... Sorry, I'm jumping the gun there. I hope the days are near at hand that chambers will be safe. He's saying, hopefully soon people will feel safe in their bedrooms. Now, it's important that we note that that is Malcolm saying that, and it makes sense that he would say that because Duncan, his father, was in his bedroom at Macbeth Castle, and he was certainly not safe because he got killed there. And Seward, Malcolm's uncle, says, what wood is this? What forest is this that we see? And Menteith said, it's the wood of Birnam. And Malcolm says, well, let every soldier hew him down a bow and bear it before him. Every soldier take a branch and put it before you. Thereby shall we shadow the numbers of our host and make discovery in report of us. In other words, Macbeth is going to receive inaccurate reports where the servants say, listen, this is how many soldiers I can see, etc. Because they're not going to be able to see how many soldiers there are because all they're going to see are branches. And essentially, Birnam Wood marching to Dunsinane. And there we can see the apparition or the equivocation there coming to play. And the soldiers start doing that. They all start taking their branches. And then Malcolm says, and none serve with Macbeth but constrain things whose hearts are absent too. So he's just mentioning what has been mentioned already, that those who are fighting for Macbeth, they are doing it because they're being forced to do it, essentially. Their hearts are absent, so their hearts are definitely not in it. They're not doing it because they want to do it. They're doing it out of fear. And the scene ends with Seward saying, well, there's no point in kind of sitting around here. The only way this is going to end is through violence. There's no two ways around it. And he says, to wars which advance the war. and let's march on as they make their way with the branches to Macbeth's castle.